Man confused when finding stray in pajamas, then sees his tag. He left the room to look for some newspaper in case the animal had to stay the night. Who knew if he was house trained? But then he heard a scream from his wife in the kitchen and he rushed in as quick as he could. She looked at him and pointed to the dog's tags which she had found under its pajamas. But when Jason saw what they read, he felt his stomach twist into a knot. This couldn't be true, could it? Jason Anderson was an ordinary man that prided himself on his family values. He loved his wife more than anything in the world. The two had been married just 2 years out of high school and never looked back. But something was still a hole in their family that they wanted to fill. Both Jason and Jenny knew what it was. They wanted kids, but that was easier said than done when it came to their case. Both of them desperately wanted to have a child. It seems that nature just wouldn't allow it. It seemed that no matter what they did, it just didn't work out. They couldn't understand what was wrong, but it wasn't new news to them. But this was old news. The two had been trying to have a child for nearly a decade with still no success. They had even consulted multiple experts in the field of conception, but the news was always grim. 5 years ago, Jason and Jenny consulted experts to try and get some peace of mind as to why they couldn't have a baby. But it seems that the answers they wanted were different from the answers they got. It turned out that all of their trying was in vain. It was clear to the experts what the problem was. It was Jenny. Jenny just couldn't conceive children. This was devastating news to the couple. But over time, they had gotten used to the idea that they couldn't conceive children of their own. But that didn't mean all was lost. Jason promised his wife that they would adopt, but given how expensive that road was, they were busy saving for it. In the meantime, the couple had to stand strong together and wait patiently for something to love and care for. But that would come a lot sooner than they thought one day while Jason was out for a drive. It was a Saturday morning and Jason decided to go for a drive. He always felt that he could clear his head driving to the third closest Walmart. It was a good 20 minutes drive there and back and he got to get the groceries. Jason was driving back from his trip to the store and was close to home in the suburbs when he saw something he couldn't believe. There was a small and frightened dog in the road with pajamas on. But what he did next would change his entire life. Jason whistled to the dog and opened his passenger door. The dog was clearly a stray and he knew he had to help it. Who didn't love man's best friend, after all? To his surprise, the dog jumped in without hesitation and snuggled up close to him. This was one of the weirdest things to happen to him in a long time. He needed to figure out where this guy belonged, but first, he had to get him home where it was safe. As Jason drove home, what lingered on his mind was what he had found the dog in. It was a quaint little Odyssey. Whoever had dressed him in it clearly loved him, but where were they? Jason felt bad for driving away with someone else's dog, but what else could he do? He couldn't leave the small guy to be left alone in the streets where something bad could easily happen to him. Jason arrived home and brought the dog inside, who clung to him like glue. His wife was more than surprised to see that her husband had gone out for groceries and come back with a companion. Before she could say anything, she explained it all. She was now concerned for the little guy just as Jason was. But they had no idea what was coming once they looked at the dog's tags. The most urgent thing on both of their minds was the health and well-being of the animal. They decided to cook some chicken and rice in a pot just for him in case he hadn't eaten in a while, and Jason put out some water for him. They had never owned a pet together, so they had to make do with what they had. Funnily enough, they had talked extensively about adopting a canine while they had to wait for their child. But once they checked his tags, their lives would never be the same again. He left the room to look for some newspaper in case the animal had to stay the night. Who knew if he was house trained? But then he heard a scream from his wife in the kitchen and he rushed in as quick as he could. She looked at him and pointed to the dog's tag, which she had found under its pajamas. But when Jason saw what they read, he felt his stomach twist into a knot. This couldn't be true, could it? Jason felt a lump in his throat as he sat staring at the dog's tag. He recognized the number engraved onto the metal. It was his own. How could that have been right? He saw a second number and called it. Surprisingly, the number immediately popped up as his father's. What was going on? His father picked up the phone and asked him how he was doing, but Jason needed answers. Once Jason asked his father if he knew anything about the dog with both of their numbers on it, he started laughing. Clearly, he did know something. His father explained that he had rescued the dog from a shelter and was going to surprise Jason and Jenny with the dog. He knew how hard life had been on them and wanted them to have something to love and care for while they saved their money for adoption. This extended even to the price of rescuing an animal. So with one more cost covered, his father figured the dog would be just what they needed to keep them company and be a good companion for their child when they finally did end up adopting. Plus, if they weren't ready, his father was also ready to keep the dog for himself. He was cute after all. Jason didn't know what to say. He got off the phone with his father and explained the situation to Jenny. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded her head and hugged the dog. They weren't expecting him, but made sure to get all the necessary things that he needed to be comfortable. Now that they had a new canine companion, Jason was sure that things would only look up from there. The two cuddled their dog tightly, but there was still one question that still lingered on Jason's mind that had just clicked: why the dog was so fond of him on the road. No wonder the dog glued itself to him. He must have recognized that Jason looked a lot like Mark, his father. He went out and bought all of the things that their new companion needed to be healthy and happy. They knew that when they could finally afford to adopt, at least they wouldn't be alone. They'd have their canine to help look after their child and be a companion to them.